Hello everyone, welcome to another Odd Commander deck tech. Here we go, continuing our series of decks that are focused on specific land types. We've done locuses, spheres, and caves so far. Now let's talk about towns. There are 23 towns in the game, and it's the newest non-basic land type to come to the game as of the recording of this video, all of which came from the Final Fantasy set. Naturally, they come in all 5 colors, so let's quickly run through all of them. First, we have a cycle of 10 common towns, all of which tap for 2 colors and enter tapped. Nothing else really going on here other than that they're towns. We then have a cycle of 5 rare towns that are monocolored and enter tapped, but they also have an adventure attached to them with various effects. They are all decently powerful effects. None of them synergize super well with each other, but we can definitely make them useful in the deck that we're going to end up building. Everything else is cycleless, so let's just go through each one. Adventurers Inn and Crossroads Village are at common level, one gains life and the other taps for 1 color of your choice. Capital City filters your mana and can also be cycled. Balam Garden Seed Academy taps for green or blue, but it can also transform into a flying vehicle that can draw cards when it attacks. Clive's Hideaway has Hideaway and lets you play the exiled cards if you control 4 or more legendary creatures. Eden, Seed of the Sanctum, lets you mill cards, and then if you want, you can sacrifice it to return a permanent from your graveyard to your hand. Starting Town adds a mana of any color for a life, but it comes in tapped on the first 3 turns of the game, which honestly is not that big of a downside. And last, the Gold Saucer lets you gamble for treasure, and you can trade 2 of those treasures for a card draw. Mostly, towns give me the impression of not having a lot going on that would persuade me to play a bunch of towns together. But there is a clear and obvious choice for the commander, which is the Wandering Minstrel, with 3 very relevant abilities. It lets our lands enter untapped, it creates 2/2 creatures if we have 5 or more towns, and if we pay 8, it can give all of our creatures a massive buff based on the number of towns we have. No matter how we look at this is the best and basically only choice if we want to build towns. However, there's another quirk about the Wandering Minstrel that gives me a chance to build a deck that I've been wanting for a long time, and this is how we're going to make this deck unique and really shine. The Wandering Minstrel is one of only a select few commanders that have a mana value of 2 or less and a color identity of all 5 colors. This means that Lurrus of the Dream Den can legally be built as a companion to this commander, since Lurrus requires that all permanents in the main deck have a mana value of 2 or less. And I actually really love this idea. It adds a great deck building challenge, balancing the aspects of being able to play cards from your graveyard as well as doing the town thing that the deck really wants you to do. So that's our game plan. We're going to build a deck with the Wandering Minstrel at the head and Lurrus as the companion, so no permanent card in our deck has a mana value of greater than 2. We're also going to include every single town in the deck, so our ultimate goal is activating the Wandering Minstrel's ability to pump up a bunch of creatures and swing for the win. Let's start with ramp. Most of the lands in our deck are going to be non-basic towns, so we need cards that are able to get non-basic lands, or specifically towns, from our deck. Reach to the Horizon is a great start. It gives us 2 towns at once. Realms Uncharted grabs us 4 lands, 2 of them go to the graveyard, which we're most likely going to be able to play again using Lurrus. Reshape the Earth will grab us 10 lands, which almost certainly is going to be a game-ending spell since we can then tap 8 of them to activate the Minstrel. Tempt with Discovery involves your opponents and can net you a bunch of lands. Disorienting Choice serves as either removal for artifacts and enchantments that your opponents control, or ramp if they don't want to give them up. Sakura Tribe Elder is pretty limited in the deck since we're only running 8 basic lands total, but this can help with our fixing if we're missing any colors for our spells. And Elvish Reclaimer can get any land at the price of sacrificing a land, which will help with our landfall and won't matter, assuming we can replay the land anyways. Then there's the ability to get more lands onto the battlefield. Coiling Oracle can get them off the top of the library, or just another card into your hand. Druid Class and Exploration let us play extra lands every turn. Gretchen Titchwell lets us pay for card draw and an extra land drop. Croson Wayfarer lets us play an extra land right away, and this kind of card is important in the deck since Lurrus can let us repeatedly replay this kind of one-off sacrifice creature, creature and is a really big asset for any Lurrus deck. Open the Way gets us 4 lands from your deck straight onto the battlefield. Poo Poo UFO can enable you to play 1 more land per turn and also gets a lot of power from playing lands on its own. And Town Greeter can get you some mill and a town from the top 4. Last but not least, we have Prismatic Omen, which gives all of our lands every basic land type, which is very good for mana fixing. I'm not terribly worried about fixing in this deck since we have so much ramp and are not going to struggle with playing lands, but nevertheless, it's helpful if it comes down to it. This next section is about recursion, and I'm including both ways to get lands and non-lands back from the graveyard and the battlefield. That's a pretty broad subject, but the point is that we want to be able to replay these cards one way or another. We need this redundancy for getting cards from the graveyard because Lurrus can, it turns out, be a very big target for removal, so having the ability to get it back and protect it is pretty important. Let's start with getting lands back, something that Lurrus doesn't natively support, and we need to add a bunch of support for it in the deck. Aftermath Analyst gives us some mill and can return all of our lands from our graveyard to the battlefield. Honestly, Aftermath Analyst is one of the best inclusions for basically any land deck, in my humble opinion. Bramble Familiar gives us a bunch of mill on its adventure, and then gives one of those cards back. Then you can get it back to your hand from the battlefield if you want. Life from the Loam is a classic way to get a bunch of lands back to the hand and return itself to your hand in exchange for some dredging. Splendid Reclamation returns every land from your graveyard to the battlefield, and the same goes for Will of the Sultai, but it also gives you the chance to buff a creature quite a lot. We also have ways to return lands to our hand from the battlefield. We have some Moonfolk in here with Floodbringer, Oboro Breeze Caller, and Soratomi's Cloudskater, which all give a small advantage and can be repeatedly used if need be. And we have Wonderscape Sage, which we can only use once a turn, but gives us unconditional card draw with the number of towns that we have in the deck. Additionally, we have Trade Routes, one of the easiest ways to return lands to our hand, but one that doesn't really give any other benefits if we're just planning to replay them instead of discard them. Now, let's visit all of the other recursion. Exploration Bridgeship gives us extra land drops, but we can also cast a permanent from our graveyard for the price of sacrificing a land. Living Death returns everything from our graveyard, which could potentially be a lot since we're planning on sacrificing creatures a lot. Perpetual Timepiece can get anything back into our deck for a low cost. Priest of Fell Rites gets a creature back from the graveyard, potentially twice, which is important because if we don't have Lurrus, this is a way to get it back without needing Lurrus to recur it. And last, Quest for the Necropolis and Soulstare Expedition both get quest counters for Landfall and return creatures from our graveyard. Now, let's visit our Landfall payoffs. One of my favorite things about this is that the deck really wants you to have some big and trampling creatures, even if just temporarily, so cards like Akrum's Stonewalker and Zektar's Shrine Expedition are great to just get a big creature out quickly so that it can attack quickly with the Minstrel's buff. We have a bunch of creatures that get big or make other creatures big for that same purpose. We have Bristly Bill Spinesower, Dragon Master Outcast, Glyph Elemental, Ride the Shootpuff, Saz's Chocobo, Scythecat Cub, Tifa Lockhart, and Vinelasher Kudzu, all getting us large things to swing with. Hedron Crab helps us fill up a graveyard with every landfall. Iridescent Vinelasher and Sabotender ping our opponents with landfall. Lotus Cobra gets us some extra mana for landfall, which is great for getting the Minstrel's ability activated quickly. And Springheart Nantuko can copy any of these creatures with landfall. I feel like the landfall strategy is pretty straightforward in this deck, mostly because a lot of the bigger payoffs cost more than 2, and so mostly we're left with the things that start small and get big after a lot of uses, which is exactly what we intend to do. Last, let's go over the synergistic protection and interaction pieces. We're taking full advantage of Lurrus to repeatedly get creatures back from the graveyard after using them to remove troublesome pieces from the board or protecting our creatures from attacks. Alseid of Life's Bounty and Kami of False Hope are great at protecting Lurrus. Diversion Unit and Siren Stormtamer can counter spells slung our way. Seal of Cleansing and Seal of Removal are both great removal pieces that can be recurred. High Priest of Penance is a fantastic blocker that lets us remove something if it gets hit. And Kroxa Titan of Death's Hunger is mostly in here because I find it really funny that it fits in a deck that has Lurrus in it, and is definitely good for keeping our opponent's hand size in check. Besides a couple of other counterspells and the Lightning Greaves, the only other things of note are Sylvan Safekeeper, which is great at sacrificing lands and can serve as giving something Shroud, and Tamik Distinguished Advocist, which can stop our opponents from interfering with our ability to play lands from our graveyard. I've been looking for a good commander for my 5-color Lurrus idea, and the other commanders of Ezio and Jensen Carthalion didn't really do the trick for me. The Wandering Minstrel seems like the perfect home for this, and I love that I could bring a unique spin to the town deck despite there being a very clear choice on which commander to pick. I'm excited to continue on this series and finish out with the rest of the land types. What do you think of this build, and what do you think of this kind of experiment that I'm going on with the non-basic land types? Let me know in the comments. I'll see you all in the next one.